What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to another video. And today I am super excited to finally be able to get my hands on a Dialed Arxos sight. Just like all of our sight review videos, we will be going over this thing in detail, but most importantly, I want to debunk some of the negative or false statements that have been made about this sight, just so you guys can make a more educated and accurate purchasing decision. Now, at the Michigan TAC event, I had the opportunity to speak to Scott Bacon, who is the Chief Operational Officer at Dialed, and we talked on how all major sight manufacturers across the board all have their pros and cons. Now, for you as a consumer, the hardest decision that you have to make when looking at purchasing a high-end sight is which one of those cons are you guys comfortable settling on. Now, the Dialed team was very aware of that when they went into the design and development of the Arxos sight, and one of their primary goals was to minimize those cons as much as possible, which has undoubtedly brought innovation and change to the archery industry. Now, when talking about the specifications of this sight, it is constructed of 60-61 aluminum, but what the Dialed team did differently is they actually added a Cerakote finish versus using an anodizing process. And what that means for you as a consumer is you are getting a very durable and rugged bow sight. And the reason that I say that is because through the anodizing process, the chemicals actually change the properties of aluminum, which actually fatigues it. Whereas if you use a Cerakote finish, it has no impact on the aluminum whatsoever, so it allows it to maintain its structural integrity. In addition to that, Cerakote is held to color standards and color consistencies, and that is really how Dialed is able to offer you guys these unique color options. As you can see, I have this black sight. This thing looks absolutely amazing. It is a very clean looking sight, but they also offer this in their sage, which is the same as the ambush green. They offer it in earth, which is the same as the buckskin Hoyt, and then they also offer this in a smoke, which is the same as the Matthews granite. So again, you do have a lot of color options that you can choose from. Now, in addition to that, the Cerakote finish is the most durable finish that you can add to aluminum because of the ceramic contents, and it's going to win in a durability test over anodizing every single time. So again, it just ties into the ruggedness and the durability of this sight. Now, just like all sights, you are going to have the ability to do a second and third axis adjustment. When it comes to your windage, you're going to be able to do a macro adjustment to do drastic left to rights, but you also have the ability to do a micro adjust to really dial in that left and right. Now, when it comes to your elevation, it's going to be a macro adjustment to get this thing set up. And then you also have the ability to customize your scope housing. You can pick from a double pin option or a triple pin option. And then they're also offering this in a 19 thousandths pin or a 10 thousandths pin. Now, when I was talking to Scott at the TAC event, he did let me know that they are working on a couple different sight setups that are going to give you the ability to adjust the pin gap. So make sure you guys stay tuned and follow Dialed Archery so you guys know when that is being released. There's no ETA yet, but he did say that they are in the design and development phase of that. Now, another really unique selling feature of the Dialed Arxos is the fact that you have the ability to customize where you would like your sight tape. You can run it on the right or you can run it on the left side of the bow. For me, I opted to go on the left side for a couple reasons. The first one being is that your pin indicators are only on the left side. So if you run it on the right, being a right-handed shooter, the only pin indicator you're going to get is this laser engraved marking, which is your top pin only. You will not have a second or third pin indicator. So again, it makes the most sense to run it on the left. And then from a hunting standpoint, for me being a right-handed shooter, if I'm at full draw and an animal happens to make a move, it's a lot easier for me to come off the string and reference where my other pins are at and make an adjustment versus trying to peek over my quiver or over to the right side of my bow. So that's why I decided to go with that. Now, when it comes to what type of mounting options you have, the Arxos sight is only going to be available in a dovetail mount or a Picatinny rail mount. It is not offered in a fixed mount like some of the other sight manufacturers. Now, shifting over to the features of the sight, there are 3 distinct features that Dialed is just extremely well known for, and the first one being the void dial. Now, the void dial is obviously it's a large, oversized wheel. It's very texturized. It makes it very easy to grab a hold of this thing and sweep through the full range of your sight tape. And then also you can see that they have this angled slide rail, which they're actually calling their AES system, which I believe stands for Angled Elevation Slider. It could be system, but like I said, that is a very distinct feature, and the point of that design is that it actually, when you slide down, it brings your scope housing closer to the bow, essentially allowing you to shoot further distances. Now, the Dialed team is saying that that is allowing you to get anywhere from 20 to 30 yards additional on a sight tape compared to a straight up and down slider, but that is something that we'll have to test out a little bit later. Now, in addition to that, the benefit of having that canted slider rail is when you start to shoot longer distances with a traditional style slider, as you roll out, your scope housing starts to appear smaller, but being that this is bringing it closer to the bow, it's supposed to eliminate that and keep consistency of that scope housing inside your peep. So there is a lot of benefits that go into that angled elevation slider. Now, in addition to that, another feature or distinct feature is the fact that they decided to move the bubble to the top of the scope housing versus running it on the bottom. Now, for me, when I first picked up this sight, I wasn't sure if that was going to be something that I would like, but the majority of my hunting is done in the whitetail woods, and it's very rare that I ever take a shot over 30 yards. So with that being said, very rarely in the heat of the moment am I ever referencing that bubble. So by moving it to the top, it has increased my sight picture, and that was something that I immediately noticed as soon as I started sighting this in. Now, the reason behind the design, and Scott talks about this extensively in some of his videos that he's published on his page, is that when you are at full draw and you reference a bubble that is on the top of the scope housing, your arm is naturally going to move up, versus looking at the bottom of your scope housing, your arm is going to naturally move down, and it's a lot easier for you to get back on target going down than it is going up. So for me personally, I totally buy into that logic. It totally makes sense to me, but it is something that we will have to test out a little bit later down the road. Now, another unique feature of this sight is the fact that this is designed as, and what I'm calling it, is an always be ready sight, meaning that there is no slider lock like you'll see on a black gold or HHA or a spot hog. And like I said, they designed it purposely for that, because they want you to always be able to access your slider if you need to make an adjustment. Now, you hear this time and time again through other manufacturers where people have their sight locked, they're in the heat of the moment, they go to make an adjustment, and then they crank way too hard and they end up stripping that gear. Again, that is not something that you're going to have to worry about on the Arxos sight. Now, one thing that I will mention is you do have the ability to tune this sight. So if you want to add tension or make it to where it requires more force to roll this down, you'll be able to, but you can also back off that tension, making it a lot easier to slide it. Now, for me personally, I added tension to it, but keep in mind, for those that do like the extra security of having that sight locked, they do include this dial brake, which is this pin located on the right side of the sight, which basically increases the amount of tension required to move this by roughly 40%. Now, I will say with my sight, this was extremely stiff when I first got it, but it is starting to break in a little bit, but you can tell it still does its job. It still increases the tension. And with this brake on, you're still going to be able to rotate that wheel. It's designed for you to be able to override it, because again, this sight is designed to always be ready and for you to be able to make that adjustment. Now, the next feature that I want to talk about, and this is just a small one, is how you adjust your pin brightness. Now, up on the top, there is a slide cover. So if you want to dim out the pins, you'll have the ability to, or you can add light to it. Now, when I received my sight, almost immediately afterwards, they released the light kit that is now available. So you can purchase that for 60 bucks off their website. It basically replaces this existing slider, and then you're going to have a light on top. So if you're hunting out of a blind, you don't have to worry about your pins being too dim. That is something that I will definitely add to this sight. Now, the last feature that I want to talk about, and this is probably the feature that I'm most excited about, and I've talked about this previously before on some of my other videos, is my concern with having exposed gears when you're dealing with a sliding sight, because it just opens the door for those gears to get damaged or to get dirt or debris into them. And if you look at the Arxos sight, all of those gears are internal to the void dial, which is definitely going to help protect your sight, especially if you start getting into some rugged and very harsh environments. Now, next, let's talk about debunking some of the negative or false statements that have been made about this sight. And again, this is in no way meant to attack anyone that's reviewed this. I just want to make sure that you guys have a very clear understanding of this sight so you can make a more accurate and educated purchasing decision. Now, the first thing that I saw, and this was on a very recent review video of the Arxos sight, is they showed pushing down on this rail and how easy it was for it to slide. Now, I'm telling you right now, I'm pushing on this thing and it takes a lot of force to get this thing to move. I mean, to get it to move as easily as they had it in that video leads me to believe that that sight was out of tune. So literally all they would need to do was go ahead and snug down these screws. I'd probably recommend going back through and just adding blue Loctite to those. But I would snug those down, and that is going to remove the ability to slide that. Like, I'm really pushing on this thing right now to get this thing to move. So out in the field, you would literally have to smack this thing up against a tree to get that thing to budge. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about is some of the negative comments that have been made about their double pin sight, and it pertains to the pin gap. Now, I can't argue that the pin gap on that sight is very large. It's probably a lot larger than I would want to run, but you have to take into consideration Scott's background and what led into that design. Now, Scott is a huge advocate for a single pin sight, and he talks about this extensively on a podcast with the Working Class Bow Hunter. I'll put a link in the description below where you guys can go and check that out. But he talks about if you take a single pin sight and you sight it in properly, you can almost be an instinctive shooter, use a single pin, and you'll have an effective range all the way from 15 yards all the way out to 40 yards with never having to make an actual adjustment to your sight. Now, with that being said, the double pin sight was designed for a single pin, but that second pin really was there to give you the ability to extend your range if you were going out and shooting long distance at a total archery challenge event. And I will put another link in the description below of a video that shows you that sighting process in detail. It shows you how to collect the data and shows you how to pick the proper pin position so you can have an effective range at close and far distances. Now, the next thing that I want to debunk here is the sighting process. And this is going to be a long-winded one, but I want to make sure that I cover this in detail for you guys. So when it comes to the sighting process on the Arxos sight, a lot of people are complaining that you basically have to sight it in to unsight it in to get your second and third axis adjustment, and it requires some additional steps when compared to other sights. Now, for me personally, in my experience, and this is true on a black gold, it's true on an HHA, and it's true on a spot hog, when you buy a sight, they're going to level it at the bow shop. And it's not a fault to the bow shop, but when you go home, you're going to have to sight that in, and most likely you're going to have to play around with that scope housing to make sure that you're maximizing the amount of distance that you can get on a sight tape. And every time you move that scope housing, it requires you to redial back in that second and third axis. That is no different on the Arxos sight. So basically the sighting process is to find your 20-yard pin, then you're gonna level out your second axis, and then you're gonna crank this windage all the way to the left if you're a right-handed shooter to expose your third axis adjustment, and then you make that adjustment and then you dial it back in. Now, if you shoot and you shoot consistently, it's only going to take you about 3 arrows to get your windage back in, because obviously you're going to reference where it was. So when you go back, you're going to be super close to where that setting was. So again, within 3 arrows, you'll be back. I don't think that this sight requires any additional steps to sight in when compared to any other sight that is available on the market. Now, the last thing that I want to talk about, and again, this ties into a sight-in process or sighting in the bow, is the video that I saw is the guy was taking the card and he was basically trying to wrap this around the dial wheel to pick out a sight tape. Now, that if you read the instruction, is not how you're supposed to do this. This sight card is actually supposed to simplify the sighting process for you. So as you're sighting in and, you know, say your 60-yard mark is at number 45, you're going to go to your sight tape card and you're going to mark 45 or make a reference that it's at 45. So then when you're done, all you do is you take this card and you line it up to your sight tapes, and then from there you make your selection. You can slap it on and then go back out and do your verification process. In no way was this intended to like wrap around the sight. So the sighting process for the sight is actually super easy. It's very intuitive, and I don't think it's going to take a lot of effort. I think people are making this out to be a little more complicated than it actually really is. But other than that, I will be doing some additional videos on this sight as I get to spend more time testing it out. So if you guys are interested in learning more about the Arxos sight, make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, because like I said, I do have 2 other videos that I want to do to test out this sight a little bit more, and again, further educate you guys on your purchasing decision. But that is going to be it for this video. If you guys have any other questions, you know that you can leave me a comment below. You can always reach out to me directly on Instagram. And if you guys have not subscribed to this channel, please do so. Your guys' support greatly helps us out, keeps us doing what we're doing. And until next time, stay safe, stay healthy. We'll see you guys on the next one.